narrative.
I should have seen it coming. 10 years of marriage and the subtle jabs had become a constant in our relationship. But that night at my in-laws' 40th anniversary party crossed a line I couldn't ignore. The evening started like any other family gathering. Forced smiles, uncomfortable small talk, and my wife subtly distancing herself from me the moment we arrived. Her parents had always treated me with a thinly veiled contempt. Never good enough for their precious daughter, despite working 60-hour weeks to provide the lifestyle she demanded. When I arrived at the elegantly decorated hall, my mother-in-law handed out name tags to all guests. I thought nothing of it until I looked down at mine. There it was, in bold black letters. Worthless husband. Not my name. Not even son-in-law. Just worthless husband. I stood frozen, thinking it must be some kind of mistake. But then I caught my wife's smirk as she noticed my reaction. The other guests were already mingling, some glancing at my tag with uncomfortable expressions, others snickering behind champagne glasses. "Is this your idea of a joke?" I whispered to my wife when I pulled her aside. She looked at me with those cold eyes I'd grown accustomed to and laughed. "Well, it's true, isn't it?" Her words hit like a physical blow. 10 years of sacrifices, compromises, and trying to make her happy, all dismissed in a single moment of casual cruelty. And that's when something inside me finally broke. For months, I'd been carrying evidence of her betrayal in my wallet. Text messages, hotel receipts, photos from the private investigator, all confirming what I'd suspected for over a year. I'd been waiting for the right moment, planning a dignified exit. But dignity was clearly not on tonight's menu. I walked calmly to the bar, ordered a whiskey, and drank it in one go. The warmth spreading through my chest gave me the courage I needed. I picked up a spoon and clinked it against my glass, the sound cutting through the buzz of conversation until the room fell silent. Every eye turned to me as I stood tall, tags still prominently displayed on my chest. "I'd like to make a toast," I announced, my voice steadier than I felt. "To 40 years of marriage, a remarkable achievement." I raised my glass toward my in-laws. "And to the last time you'll ever see me." The room went completely still. My father-in-law choked on his drink. My wife's smile faltered, confusion replacing her earlier smug expression. "I've spent a decade trying to be good enough for this family," I continued. But tonight made it crystal clear that was never going to happen. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out an envelope. "Since we're celebrating honesty tonight, I thought I'd contribute." I placed it on the table beside me. Divorce papers, along with evidence of the affair that's been going on for the past 3 years. My wife's face drained of color. "What are you talking about?" she stammered, but the panic in her eyes told the truth. "Room 412 at the Westlake Hotel. Every Thursday afternoon for the past 8 months. Before that, it was the Harborview Inn." Should I continue? Her father stood up, his face contorted with anger. "That's enough." "Yes," I agreed. "It is enough." I removed the name tag, dropped it into my empty glass, and walked toward the exit. Behind me, chaos erupted as my wife lunged for the envelope, but her cousin, who had privately warned me months ago, intercepted it. As I pushed open the door, I heard my wife's first sob. The sound should have given me satisfaction, but all I felt was an overwhelming sense of liberation as I stepped into the cool night air, finally free. The drive home from the anniversary party was surreal. The night air felt different somehow, cleaner, fresher. For the first time in years, I was breathing without the weight of suspicion crushing my chest. It hadn't always been this way. Our early years together had been good, not perfect, but genuine. I remember the Sunday mornings cooking breakfast together, weekend trips to the coast, plans for the future spoken in excited whispers. But somewhere along the way, things changed. Success at work meant longer hours, and her growing dissatisfaction became a tangible presence in our home. The first sign appeared 3 years ago, a text message notification that flashed on her phone while she was in the shower. A name I didn't recognize, with words that no colleague would send. I dismissed it then, burying my suspicion beneath layers of denial. We had history, commitment. Surely that meant something. But the signs multiplied. Late nights at work events that left no digital footprint. New clothes she never wore around me. The growing emotional distance, punctuated by criticism that gradually eroded my self-worth. The way she flinched when I touched her unexpectedly. The smell of unfamiliar cologne that wasn't quite washed away. I confronted her once, about 8 months ago. She laughed it off, called me paranoid, insecure, turned it around until I was apologizing to her. Classic gaslighting, though I didn't recognize it then. That night, I lay awake beside her, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I was losing my mind. The next day, I contacted a private investigator, not out of revenge, but desperation for truth. Any truth that would end the maddening uncertainty. 2 weeks later, he delivered a manila envelope to my office. I waited until everyone had left for the day before opening it. The photos were unambiguous. The same man, different hotels. Thursday afternoons, her supposed yoga class. In one image, they were laughing together in a restaurant, her hand intimately placed on his. She looked happier than I'd seen her in years. I should have confronted her then. Instead, I continued gathering evidence, compiling financial records, securing my assets, consulting with a divorce attorney. Looking back, I think I was searching for something, some explanation that would make sense of the betrayal, some evidence that what we had built together had meant something to her. During those months of silent preparation, I became a ghost in my own life, going through the motions while detaching emotionally. Each dinner with her parents where they subtly belittled me, each social event where she'd criticize me just loudly enough for others to hear. I endured it all with a new sense of detachment, knowing it was temporary. What pushed me over the edge wasn't the affair itself. It was realizing that the jokes at my expense, the criticism, the name tag, they weren't just cruel jabs. They were a systematic effort to paint me as the problem, creating a narrative that would justify her betrayal to herself and others when everything eventually came to light. The night before the anniversary party, I finalized everything with my attorney. The plan was to wait another week, to handle everything privately. But seeing that name tag, hearing her casual, "Well, it's true," something snapped. Years of calculated disrespect crystallized in that moment, and I knew I couldn't spend another night living a lie. As I pulled into a hotel parking lot, not one of her Thursday afternoon haunts, my phone exploded with notifications. Messages from her parents, even her affair partner who somehow got my number. I switched it off without reading any of them. Inside my hotel room, I placed the room key on the desk and sat on the edge of the bed. For the first time in years, I felt no anxiety about what tomorrow would bring. No dread about not measuring up. Just a strange, empty clarity and the unfamiliar sensation of putting myself first. The divorce would be messy. Her family had connections, resources, but I had truth on my side, meticulously documented. And surprisingly, as I lay down in that anonymous hotel room, that felt like enough. I woke to 37 missed calls and 52 text messages. Most from her, some from her parents, a few from mutual friends already taking sides without knowing the full story. I ignored them all and called my attorney instead. "You couldn't wait one more week?" he asked, exasperation clear in his voice. The name tag was the last straw. I replied simply. He sighed. "Well, the element of surprise certainly worked in our favor." Her attorney called me at midnight, practically begging for a meeting. They're in damage control mode. The aftermath at the anniversary party, as I later learned, was exactly the chaos you'd expect. After I left, her cousin, who had suspected the affair for months, handed the envelope to her father rather than her. A small act of rebellion against the family's golden child. Her father, always so composed, opened it there at the table. The color drained from his face as he flipped through hotel receipts, text message screenshots, and photos of his daughter wrapped around another man. "Is this true?" he had demanded, voice cutting through her dramatic sobbing. She couldn't even look him in the eye. Her mother snatched the papers next, gasping as she recognized the man in the photos, the husband of one of her own friends. The scandal would ripple through their social circle like a tsunami. By the time I checked out of the hotel, word had spread. My phone continued buzzing with messages, but one caught my attention, from her father, asking to meet privately. Curiosity got the better of me, and I agreed to coffee at a quiet place downtown. He looked older than he had the night before, shoulders hunched beneath his expensive blazer. "I owe you an apology," he said without preamble after the waitress delivered our drinks. I said nothing, waiting. "We've been unfair to you." Believed her version of events without question. He stared into his coffee. That name tag, it wasn't just her idea. We all thought it was funny. "And now?" I asked. "Now I'm wondering what kind of people we've become." He pulled an envelope from his jacket. "These are copies of your evidence." She tried to destroy the originals, but her cousin had already made duplicates. He pushed it across the table. And there's something else you should know. The revelation shouldn't have shocked me, but it did. The affair partner wasn't the first. There had been others, stretching back almost to the beginning of our marriage. Her parents had suspected but looked the other way, making me the villain in their narrative rather than confronting their daughter's betrayal. Why tell me this now? I asked. Because despite everything, you were always honest. You deserved better than what we gave you. For the first time, his eyes met mine directly. And because she's claiming you fabricated everything, she's spinning a story of emotional abuse, saying you manipulated those photos. I laughed without humor. Of course she is. We won't support her narrative, he said firmly. Not this time. Later that day, she arrived at my hotel, somehow tracking me down. The security footage the hotel later provided for the divorce proceedings showed her screaming in the lobby, demanding my room number, mascara streaking down her face. When they refused, she tried a different approach. Called my phone from the lobby, voice suddenly soft, pleading. Please, just talk to me. We can work this out. What happened with him was a mistake. It didn't mean anything. Through the phone, I heard the lobby fountain in the background, confirming she was there, performing for anyone watching. 3 years wasn't a mistake, I replied calmly. It was a choice. One you made every Thursday afternoon. I'll do anything, she begged. Counseling, therapy, whatever you want. You can't throw away 10 years over one indiscretion. 3 years. Multiple men, I corrected. Your father told me everything. The silence that followed was deafening. He's lying, she finally whispered, panic evident. Goodbye, I said, and ended the call. Through the hotel room window, I watched her exit the building minutes later, phone pressed to her ear, likely already crafting the next version of her story. But for the first time in years, it wouldn't be my problem to manage. The weight of constantly measuring my words, walking on eggshells, doubting my own perceptions, it was gone. In its place was something unexpected, not satisfaction or even anger, but a quiet, growing sense of possibility. The weeks following my dramatic exit were a bizarre inversion of everything I'd known. People who had once smiled politely while ignoring her subtle put-downs now reached out with messages of support. Friends I'd lost touch with during the marriage resurfaced, offering couches to sleep on, shoulders to lean on. Most surprising was the shift in her family's dynamics. Her younger sister called me 3 days after the anniversary party. I need you to know I never thought you were worthless, she said without preamble when I answered. I should have said something all those times she belittled you. I'm sorry. Why didn't you? I asked, genuinely curious. Family politics, she replied simply. But I'm done with that now. She wasn't the only one. Mutual friends began sharing stories. How they'd noticed my wife leaving parties early with flimsy excuses, how she'd make cutting remarks about me when I wasn't present. One friend admitted seeing her with another man months before I hired the investigator, but hadn't known how to tell me. I convinced myself it wasn't my business, he confessed over beers one evening. That was cowardice, and I'm sorry. My attorney called with updates almost daily. Her initial strategy, painting me as controlling and abusive, collapsed when faced with witness statements and evidence. Her fallback position became financial, demanding the house, alimony, half my retirement. Standard negotiation tactics, my attorney assured me. We have leverage. Use it wisely. The real surprise came at our first mediation session. I arrived early, prepared for battle, only to find her father already there, waiting in the parking lot. I'm here as a witness, he said, gesturing toward the building. If you'll have me. Inside, her expression when she saw her father sitting on my side of the table was worth every penny of the legal fees. Her carefully constructed narrative crumbled in real time as he calmly recounted years of watching her manipulate situations, twist facts, and gaslight me into believing I was the problem. Enough, her attorney finally interrupted. We need to confer privately. When they returned, her demands had shifted dramatically. No more requests for the house or substantial alimony. Just a clean break and division of assets acquired during the marriage. That evening, I began the process of reclaiming spaces I'd abandoned during our relationship. I rejoined my old boxing gym, called my college roommate who had moved overseas years ago, reconnecting like no time had passed. Signed up for a cooking class I'd always been interested in, but had been subtly discouraged from pursuing. You're different, Observed my neighbor when I helped him move a couch the following weekend. More present somehow. I hadn't realized how much of myself I'd suppressed trying to be what she wanted. How much energy I'd expended monitoring her moods, anticipating criticism, second-guessing my own perceptions. Freedom from that constant vigilance felt like emerging from underwater. Sounds clearer, colors brighter, breathing easier. Not that it was all forward momentum. Some nights I'd wake at 3 a.m., heart racing, replaying moments from our marriage through this new lens of awareness. Red flags I'd ignored, manipulations I'd accepted, the slow erosion of my self-worth that had happened so gradually I hadn't noticed until I was stripped down to nothing but doubt and apologies. My therapist called it trauma bonding. The relationship became a cycle of intermittent punishment and reward, she explained during one session. It's actually similar to how gambling addiction works. The unpredictability keeps you hooked, always hoping for approval that comes just often enough to maintain the cycle. She was right. For years, I'd been gambling with my self-worth, betting that if I just tried harder, did better, earned more, I'd finally be worthy of respect. The rigged game had consumed a decade of my life. 6 weeks after the anniversary party, I received a text from an unknown number. "I'm the Thursday guy. We need to talk." My finger hovered over the delete button, but curiosity won. "We met at a coffee shop across town. She told me you were separated," he said immediately. "Said you were emotionally abusive, that you'd agreed to see other people. And you believed that for 3 years?" I asked. He looked away. I wanted to believe it. "When I found out you two were still very much together, living in the same house, taking vacations." I confronted her. "She swore you had an understanding." "There was an understanding, all right," I replied. I understood we were committed. She understood she was lying. He pushed a folder across the table. "She's been telling people I edited those hotel photos, that nothing happened between us. These prove otherwise. Use them if you need to." I left the folder untouched between us. "Why help me now?" "Because I finally realized," he said, meeting my eyes. "If she could lie so effortlessly about you, she was probably lying about everything else too." I nodded, standing to leave. The folder remained on the table. "You don't want this?" he called after me. I turned back briefly. "I don't need it anymore." Walking away, I realized it was true. The evidence, the betrayal, her opinion of me, none of it mattered anymore. I was finally free of the need to prove anything to anyone, including myself. 3 months after the anniversary party, I sat across from my attorney as he spread documents across his desk. The mediation had failed. She'd reversed course again, demanding half of everything, including the business I'd built before we even met. "She's fishing for a settlement," he explained. "Her position is weak, but she's banking on your desire to avoid a trial." He wasn't wrong. Part of me wanted to concede, to pay whatever price would end this chapter fastest. But another part, the part that had finally found its voice at that anniversary party, refused to be manipulated any longer. "We proceed to court," I decided. The discovery phase revealed financial deceptions I hadn't anticipated. Joint accounts drained months before the confrontation. Credit cards in my name I'd never seen. A secret account where she'd been siphoning household funds for years. "Look at these transactions," my forensic accountant pointed out. "Regular transfers to this offshore account, starting 3 years ago, exactly when the affair began." The timing wasn't coincidental. She'd been preparing her exit strategy, creating financial cushioning for a life without me. The betrayal had been calculated, methodical, not just emotional, but financial predation. More revelations followed. The girls' trips to Miami and Las Vegas had been rendezvous with different men. The jewelry I'd thought was lost had been sold. Even her wedding ring, a family heirloom from my grandmother, had disappeared, likely converted to cash for her secret fund. Her father called one evening, voice heavy. "There's something else you should know." He explained that they'd discovered she'd been stealing from her mother's jewelry collection for years, replacing valuable pieces with sophisticated replicas. Items with both monetary and sentimental value, quietly disappearing and funding her double life. "We filed a police report," he said, the words clearly painful. "I never thought." His voice trailed off. "Neither did I replied. At the preliminary hearing, her attorney presented a settlement offer substantially lower than her initial demands. My attorney passed me the document with raised eyebrows. "She's backing down," he whispered. The criminal investigation into the jewelry theft has her worried. I scanned the terms. Fair division of our actual joint assets. No claim on my premarital business. Reasonable alimony for 1 year. Something felt off. What's the catch? I asked. He reviewed it again, then pointed to a clause buried in the legal jargon. I'd be prohibited from discussing the circumstances of our divorce with anyone. A sweeping confidentiality provision that would prevent me from warning others about her patterns or defending myself against her narratives. No deal, I said immediately. I won't be silenced. Outside the courthouse, I encountered her mother, the first time we'd been face to face since the anniversary. She looked smaller somehow. The imperious woman who had handed me that humiliating name tag now diminished by her daughter's betrayals. I should have seen who she really was, she said softly. Instead, I helped her hurt you. I had no response that wouldn't sound like empty platitudes. We stood in uncomfortable silence until she spoke again. We've enabled her entire life. Made excuses. Covered for her. This is where that led. She looked directly at me. I'm sorry for my part in it. That night, a package arrived at my apartment, delivered by courier, requiring signature. Inside was my grandmother's wedding ring, restored and polished. The note read simply, recovered from a pawn shop in Baltimore. It belongs with you. Her father. I placed it in my safe, next to the divorce papers and evidence files. Physical artifacts of a chapter closing. The following week brought another unexpected development. A woman contacted my attorney, claiming to have been involved with my wife's affair partner during the same period of their relationship. She needs to know she wasn't the only one being deceived, my attorney explained as he forwarded her sworn statement. The web of betrayal expanded with each new revelation. The man she'd thrown away our marriage for had been playing the same game, creating the same elaborate lies, probably giving her the same empty promises she'd so eagerly believed. There was no satisfaction in these discoveries, only a deepening understanding of how thoroughly I'd been entangled in layers of deception. Each revelation was another confirmation that walking away had been the only sane response. In therapy, I worked through the lingering questions. Not why she had cheated. That was about her character, not my worth, but why I had tolerated the disrespect for so long. How I had gradually accepted a diminished version of myself as normal. You were caught in the sunk cost fallacy, my therapist suggested. The more you invested in trying to make it work, the harder it became to walk away, even as evidence mounted that you should. She was right. I'd mistaken endurance for commitment, suffering for loyalty. The name tag at the anniversary hadn't created my breaking point. It had simply illuminated what was already broken. 6 months after that fateful night, I received notice that she'd accepted our counteroffer. No confidentiality clause. No claim on my business. A clean, final break with no lingering financial entanglements. That evening, I stood on my balcony watching the sunset, feeling the weight of 10 years finally beginning to lift. Tomorrow would bring paperwork and signatures, the official end of a chapter I'd once thought would be my whole story. But tonight was for acknowledging how far I'd come from the man who had stared down at that worthless husband tag and, for one devastating moment, believed it might be true. 1 year to the day after the anniversary party incident, I stood in front of the mirror adjusting my tie. The reflection looking back at me belonged to someone I was still getting to know, a man with clear eyes and straight shoulders, no longer bracing for criticism or measuring his worth through someone else's assessment. The divorce had been finalized 7 months ago. The proceedings weren't as contentious as they might have been. Her father's testimony and the mounting evidence had stripped away her leverage. In the end, she signed the papers without meeting my eyes, her final performance of wounded innocence playing to an empty theater. Her parents had sold their house and moved across the country, a fresh start after the scandal that had rippled through their social circle. Her father and I still exchanged occasional messages, brief updates, nothing deep. A strange friendship built on shared disillusionment. My business had thrived in the aftermath. Without the constant drain of a toxic relationship, I found renewed energy and creativity. The team noticed the difference immediately. It's like working with a different person, my operations manager commented during a strategy meeting. You're more decisive, more present. She wasn't wrong. For years, I'd second-guessed every business decision, hearing my wife's voice in my head questioning my judgment, predicting failure. That voice had finally gone silent. The social repercussions had been mixed. Some mutual friends had chosen sides, believing her version despite the evidence. Others had quietly distanced themselves from both of us, uncomfortable with the messiness of real life intruding on their curated social circles. I found I didn't miss them. Instead, new connections had formed, genuine relationships built on mutual respect rather than social obligation. I'd reconnected with old friends who had drifted away during my marriage, many admitting they'd found it difficult to watch my slow erosion under her influence. "You disappeared into that relationship," my college roommate told me during a weekend visit. It was like watching someone being slowly erased. There had been attempts at reconciliation from her side, tearful phone calls at midnight, a handwritten letter claiming transformation and regret, a chance encounter engineered to seem coincidental, where she appeared with a carefully rehearsed speech about growth and second chances. Each time, the urge to engage had diminished further, not from anger or resentment, but from the quiet certainty that stepping back into that dynamic would be an act of self-betrayal I could no longer commit. The legal proceedings had revealed one final, unexpected twist. The money she'd been siphoning hadn't been for a post-divorce escape fund, as we'd assumed. It had been going to a medical clinic in Switzerland, expensive treatments for an illness she'd hidden from everyone, including her lover. That discovery had momentarily reopened the wound. Had she turned to affairs and financial deception because of her diagnosis? Was there a narrative where she became the sympathetic character after all? My therapist had helped me navigate that moral labyrinth. Illness explains behavior, but doesn't justify cruelty, she reminded me. Many people face health crises without betraying those who love them. She was right. The diagnosis provided context, but not absolution. The systematic humiliation, gaslighting, and financial exploitation had been choices, not symptoms. I checked my watch. Almost time. Tonight was the launch party for our company's expansion, a milestone I'd been working toward for years. My team had insisted on making it a proper celebration, renting out a rooftop venue with views of the city skyline. As I drove there, I reflected on the journey of the past year. The name tag incident that had seemed so catastrophic had actually been a doorway to freedom. That public humiliation had broken something loose inside me, not my dignity as she'd intended, but the chains of a false narrative I'd accepted for too long. The venue was already buzzing when I arrived. Colleagues, clients, investors, all gathered to celebrate what we'd built together. As I made my way through the crowd, accepting congratulations and well wishes, I caught sight of a familiar face near the bar. Her cousin, the one who had intercepted the envelope that night and made copies of the evidence, was chatting with my marketing director. She saw me and excused herself, making her way over. "Hope you don't mind me crashing," she said with a smile. "Your assistant said it would be okay." "Of course," I replied, genuinely pleased to see her. "How are you?" "Better than some of the family," she said with characteristic directness. "She's back living with her parents, by the way. The treatments didn't work." I nodded, unsure what response was appropriate. "Don't worry," she added, reading my expression. "I didn't come to burden you with family drama. I came because I wanted to see what you've built." She gestured around the room. "It's impressive." Later in the evening, I found myself on the rooftop terrace, taking a moment alone beneath the stars. In the distance, I could see the hotel where the anniversary party had taken place 1 year ago. From this vantage point, it seemed small, insignificant. My phone buzzed with a text message. Unknown number, but I immediately recognized the content. Another plea from my ex-wife, another attempt to rewrite our history. I deleted it without reading beyond the first line, then blocked the number. Some chapters don't need resolution. Some people don't deserve second chances. Some betrayals can't be undone with apologies or explanations. As I rejoined the party, surrounded by people who valued my contributions and respected my boundaries, I realized the most important lesson of the past year. Walking away isn't always an ending. Sometimes, it's the beginning you've been waiting for. That worthless husband name tag, meant to diminish me, had instead become the catalyst for reclaiming my worth. Not through revenge or retaliation, but through the simple, powerful act of refusing to participate any longer in my own destruction. And that, perhaps, was the greatest victory of all.
Our story has come to an end. If you've made it this far, how about subscribing to our channel? It helps us immensely. I've selected 2 other videos for you that I'm sure you'll enjoy. Feel free to click on them. I'll be waiting for you in the next story. See you soon.